Hi, my name is Emma Marbes, and I'm going to be speaking about the causes and methods of the colonization of Lebanon by European powers. How and why was Lebanon colonized by France, and how was it affected? This is the timeline I'm going to be following, and these are the topics I'm going to be touching upon. First, I'll speak about the end of the World War One, then the Sykes-Picot Agreement, the start of the French Mandate, the Franco-Lebanese Treaty of Independence, the fall of France, Lebanon's first presidential election, Lebanon's independence, the aftermath of World War Two, Lebanon becoming an official member of the UN and Arab League, and finally, I'll speak about present-day Lebanon, its culture, and current crisis. 1914, the end of World War One. Over 30 nations declared war between 1914 and 1918. The majority joined on the side of the Allies, including Serbia, Russia, France, Britain, Italy, and the United States. They were opposed by Germany, Austria Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire, who together formed the Central Powers. Delegates signed the Treaty of Versailles in the former palace's famous Hall of Mirrors, ending World War One on November 11, 1918. To add, in secret, France and Britain, who are part of the Allies who won the war, had created the Sykes-Picot Agreement. 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement. The Sykes-Picot Agreement is a secret convention made during World War One between Great Britain and France with the assent of Imperial Russia for the dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire following their defeat at the end of the war. The agreement led to the division of Turkish-held Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Palestine into various French and British administrated areas. Negotiations were begun in November 1915 and it was finalized in 1916. The final agreement took its name from the chief negotiators from Britain and France, Sir Mark Sykes and Francois-Georges Picot. Sergei Dmitrievich Sazonov was also present to represent Russia, the third member of the Triple Entente. 1920, the start of the French Mandate. After the war broke out in the summer of 1914, the Allies, Britain, France, and Russia held many discussions regarding the future of the Ottoman Empire. Sir Mark Sykes and Francois Georges Picot authored another secret agreement regarding the future spoils of the Great War. The arrangement largely neglected to allow for the future growth of the Arab nationalism all across the Middle East. This then led to the colonialism of Lebanon by France as a result of the Sykes-Picot Agreement. Lebanon officially became part of the French colonial empire as part of the French Mandate for Syria and Lebanon. France wanted to use Lebanon as a place to be a safe haven for the Maronite population of the Mutasarifa, an Ottoman administrative unit of Mount Lebanon. 1936, the Franco Lebanese Treaty. After being colonized by France for years, Lebanon was requesting full independence, and as a result, a Franco Lebanese Treaty of Independence and Friendship was created and signed in 1936 but was not ratified by the French government, since it included a request of the complete banishment of all free French troops in Lebanon, and France did not approve of it. Catrot, under instructions of the General de Gaulle, explains that France needs the right to station troops in the country for the protection of Christians and other minorities in Syria and Lebanon. So they never reached an agreement and the treaty was not finalized at the time. 1940, the fall of France. In September 1939, France and Britain declared war with Germany. The French army was in theory as strong as Germany's. It had a vast empire and had sophisticated arms industry. However, weeks in the late spring and early summer of 1940, France suffered a humiliating defeat and was quickly occupied by Germany. Its failure was a result of a hopelessly divided French political elite, a lack of quality military leadership, and rudimentary French military tactics. On the battlefield, France faced a vastly more prepared German army that utilized both more advanced weapons and sophisticated tactics. It was a big mismatch. In consequence, Lebanon was controlled by the Vichy authorities after the fall of France in 1940, but was occupied by British and Free French troops in 1941. September 1943, Lebanon's first presidential election. The Free French representative proclaimed the independence of Lebanon and Syria, which was underwritten by the British government. Because of their own precarious position after losing the war against Germany, the Free French were unwilling to relax control. In 1943, however, they held elections which resulted in the victory for the nationalists. Their leader, Bishara al-Khoury, was elected president. After the presidential win, the new government passed legislation introducing certain constitutional changes that eliminated all traces of French influence, to which the French objected. November 1943, Lebanon's independence. After the election, November 11, 1943, the president and almost the entire government were arrested by the French troops for trying to amend the constitution to eliminate French privileges in Lebanon. 11 days after their arrest, they were freed from Rashaya in the morning of Monday, 22 November 1943, but only after the augmenting pressure that the Lebanese people and Britain had put on France. Since then, this day has been celebrated as the Lebanese Independence Day. This then led to an insurrection followed by British diplomatic intervention, and from that, the French restored the government and transferred powers to it. 1945, the aftermath of World War II. World War II began in Europe on September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. Great Britain and France responded by declaring war on Germany on September 3rd. France suffered a humiliating defeat and was quickly occupied by Germany. The devastation wreaked in France by World War II was nearly total. Its infrastructure and economy were ruined, its cities destroyed, and the French that had survived the German occupation had little to eat and even often less money. They left France weak and gave it less time and power to still be occupying Lebanon. To add, although independence had been proclaimed on November 22, 1943, it was not until after this crisis, in 1945, that Lebanon became wholly independent, with not a sight of any Free French troop still occupying it. 1946. Lebanon is an official member of the UN and Arab League. The Lebanese Republic is one of the 51 founding members of United Nations when it signed the United Nations Conference and International Organization in 1945. When Lebanon became wholly independent, it had already become a member of the United Nations and the Arab League. This was completed by the end of 1946, and it is one of Lebanon's most significant accomplishments. Now, to go deeper into detail about Lebanon as a country today and how it's been doing, I will first speak about its geography, culture, and civilization. Lebanon is a country located on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea, and its capital is Beirut. It consists of a narrow strip of territory and is one of the world's smaller sovereign states. Lebanon is one of the most densely populated countries in the Mediterranean area and has a high rate of literacy. Notwithstanding its meager natural resources, Lebanon long managed to serve as a busy commercial and cultural center for the Middle East by accepting all cultural, religious, and ethnic differences between its citizens. To go on, I will now speak about the economic crisis that's been going on in Lebanon. Present day Lebanon. The World Bank recently reported that Lebanon's economic and financial crisis may even hit the top three most severe crises globally since the 1850s. The local currency is experiencing inflations in the triple digits, and Lebanon's GDP fell to 37%, an amount usually associated with the conflicts of war. Economic instability continues to have serious implications on the livelihoods of everyday people. Nearly three-quarters of Lebanese live below the poverty line, and it's affecting every single person and Lebanon as a whole dearly. Personal reflection. I noticed that the current situation in Lebanon and the colonization of Lebanon by France are both similar to each other in the sense that both the Lebanese government and the French were very selfish toward Lebanon. The Lebanese government are corrupt, selfish, and took all the money that was supposed to be used for the bettering of Lebanon as a country, and instead they took all that money for themselves. Similarly, like the Lebanese government, France was also very selfish for never giving Lebanon its full independence even after it wasn't in the position to still be colonizing and occupying it. Lebanon, after losing the war with Germany, was left very, very weak. It wasn't in the right position to still be colonizing and occupying Lebanon and could have easily given it its full independence. But it didn't, though Lebanon proved to deserve it and worked hard enough for it. Thank you for listening. That's it for the presentation, and I hope you enjoyed. This is my bibliography and all the sources that I used to retrieve all the information that I used in my presentation. Thank you and goodbye.